Sweet. Cool. So, welcome back to the Whiskey and Wisdom podcast. I'm your co-host, Chris Kellum, and I am with
Tyler, y'all.
And we are bringing on a special guest who I've been seeing around the internet for a while now. I'm happy to finally have you on. The owner, starter, founder, I don't know all the fun titles you have, but you're from Blind Barrels, correct?
Correct. Yeah, the founder and CEO of Blind Barrels.
Yeah. And this is Bobby, by the way, since we didn't actually announce who we
I was like, there's so many. When you get into the entrepreneur world, it gets really confusing as to what titles people have nowadays.
Yeah, we're I'm thinking of messing up the cards for some of my guys. So like instead of on it says like whiskey wizard, but they prefer curator because that soft touch card. But I'm thinking like chief tasting officer, so CTO.
I like it. Yeah,
so you can get fun, and I've seen some of those titles, but yeah, I just usually go founder and CEO.
Nice.
I feel like it really lends itself to for like good internet personality, I guess you could say, naming yourself Bobby Barrels.
It could be Bobby Blind Barrels. Well, it's funny if you go look up Bob DeMars, you'll find documentaries I've made, and if you look up Robert DeMars, you'll find an education I've run, a company that I've run, and then Bobby DeMars. So it was almost like I've never been Robbie. I always feel like Robbie's going to steal your girl.
Right.
I always wanted to make a coffee table book where it's like, like 4 slides of like what Bob, Robert, Bobby, and Robbie, like you're golfing and like Robert never steps on the line, right? Yep. Bob buys a round of beers, Robbie shits in the hole. That there's something, that Robbie's going to steal your girl, or Robbie's like, I don't know, there's something lewd about Robbie, about what Robbie's going to do. I don't know.
I love it. That's awesome.
Sounds pretty accurate.
It writes itself.
It does. It does.
Right to shit in the hole, but it writes itself basically.
All right. So, in general, I've been following you and the amazing stuff you've been coming out with and doing for a little while now. I don't remember exactly when Tyler sent me the first lovely thing on social media. It was like, oh, we need to check this dude's stuff out. But tell us a little about yourself and the company.
Yeah, so this whole thing, this was a COVID baby. My buddy at Merrill Lynch was doing blind tastings while we were all quarantined. And, the films that I was in the process of developing and the education company that I ran, basically, everything died for like a period of 3 to 6 months. And, you can only make so many accent walls in the house, and I put in 2 bidets, and my buddy was like, hey, I'm doing blinds. You want to jump in? I'm like, yeah. And I'd never done it with whiskey. I'd done it with wine before.
Oh yeah.
And I called him afterwards, and he had like 8 samples, and he was very generous because he was literally making you pay like exactly what he paid. So he'd have like an old Fitz Dusty or something that was really like a $800 bottle, but he got it for like $80. So he was only charging like, $3 a pour or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so it was really generous for that. And afterwards I called him like, this feels like a business. And he goes, yeah, okay. And I said, nobody's ever done this before. Like, why? And I quickly figured out why. It's because there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through in order to be compliant for the 3-tier system. And so I called up an ABC attorney, an alcohol beverage control attorney.
Right.
And by the way, this is a great life hack. If you ever need legal advice, you can pretty much do a free hour-long consultation with any attorney, right? And so I did a free hour-long consultation. It lasted 7 minutes. The guy's like, look, there's 8 federal laws you're trying to break. And I was like, okay.
Oh, all right.
So then I did 16 more free hour-long consultations with different ABC attorneys.
Wow.
And then I came up with a way to do it before we raised the money, and then I came up with a better way, and then even a better way. And we were even thinking about tweaking it, but there's multiple ways to do what we're doing, and it's not easy. We're not in a basement with a funnel. The bottling is a whole separate process. There's a lot of stuff that legally happens with the labels and, to be compliant with the Trade Tax Bureau. So there's federal, there's state, there's county laws, there's all these things, and there's a lot of key partnerships that are in play. So we spent a whole year creating those partnerships, creating the branding. I did try to get you guys a kit in time so you could really experience it yourself. You've done blinds before, and blinds are so great because they're about discovery and they're about education, and ultimately it's really communal, right? And it's mindful, really. You're being present with the liquid and your friends, and somebody's getting different flavors, and you guys are bouncing off each other. Or someone's guessing that it's a bourbon or a rye, and it's a single malt. You were both wrong. So there's always a fun thing to that. Usually people that are quiet, that don't want to say what they're getting, are usually the ones that are actually really accurate.
Makes sense.
And, you know, they have to like gain that confidence, right? What we're going to be doing, so when you guys do get your kit, you'll see that there's a, you know, it's a high-end, soft touch. You know, we wanted everyone to associate, because we only do small American craft distilleries. We only feature craft.
That's awesome.
You know, we're not going to have Mickers and Maker's Mark in the lineup. We don't want things that are really accessible. There's 3,000 distilleries that you haven't heard of, and half of them suck. But but you know, like, we've kissed a lot of frogs. I will
I'm
say
sure.
that. But man, you know, ever since we did a partnership with Fred Minnick, and really we just started opening up to really cool craft. There's craft distilleries we've chased since we started that we're now getting in the lineup, and not just getting them in the lineup, but getting like a special release from them.
Oh, nice.
And you know, our rules are, it's got to be craft, it's got to be American. We haven't had a bottle that was less than $50 retail, you know, at the distillery.
Wow, yeah.
Most bottles are in that 50 to 130 range. But when we sell a $130 bottle, it's usually really like a $200 or $240 bottle.
Right.
So the blinds are fun. People usually come for the blinds, but they really stay for the access. You know, we've done a barrel pick with Frey and one with Southern Star that was the sister barrel, the barrel that won the New York Spirits competition. So Pete gave us, it was so dark. It was the darkest whiskey I've still ever seen in my entire life. If I had, you know, 1,000 of those bottles, we would have sold them.
Amazing.
We had a 15-year rye matured in a Weller barrel that we did with Mammoth. We just did a barrels pick with Still Austin. So we have too many members now where we can't really do a barrel pick, because everything would go into samples and we couldn't sell the bottles. Right. So we trademarked the name The Smallest Batch, and we do what's called the Smallest Batch series. The smallest a small batch can be, which is 2 barrels. And so we picked 2 barrels, and it wasn't just picking 2 favorite barrels. It was picking 2 that really blended well together. And so that was the first in that series that we just did. That was Still Austin. We had the Lost Barrel of a Whiskey Outlaw. Have you seen the Doc Holliday bottle? Like, there's a big gimmicky one now with like the actual guns, and it's like
I did actually, yeah.
And World Whiskey Society, they do the Wyatt Earp, they do a bunch of those. And the thing is, the Doc Holidays, they have like a 6-year and a 7-year. That special one is a 10-year, but it's not the 10-year that we had, because we sold it out of existence. So most of the stuff they're sourcing is MGP, but some of it's from, you know, the one of them's from Oklahoma. Like, I don't know where they're sourcing all their stuff, but they sent us a bottle. It was good, you know. But we don't like just a white label situation where somebody just takes the whiskey and just throws their label on it, because there's no story there. Yeah. And they sent me the 10-year, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And I was like, is this 10-year MGP? And they're like, no, it's this family, Carlos Lavelle. These Lavelles out of Georgia were moonshiners for 150 years. And they were making this sour mash Georgia bourbon, and they'd bounce around to the Appalachians. They evaded the feds for 4 generations, got caught a couple of times. And Carlos Lavelle, see, when most people start making whiskey, unless they've apprenticed or they're really a scientist or they come from a background, they're usually not good at it right off the bat. It takes them a while to get good at it, if they ever get good at it. Well, this guy was making whiskey since he was 7 years old. And when he was in his 70s, his daughter convinced him to go legitimate, and he started Ivy Mountain Distillery. And 3 years, so he was making really moonshine. He wasn't aging it, and then he was aging it like 6 months. And then what happened was, about 3 years in, he died. Oh, wow. So all these barrels that he made sat there. He wasn't really aging them that long. All the stuff he's ever made never really was aging. And it sat there for about 4 or 5 years. Bardstown bought a bunch, put it in their Explorer series and their Fusion series. The rest, and you know, they sold that for $130. The rest ended up in Texas. And you know, that Texas heat, like it you know, like, oh yeah, 4 years is 8 years. So it was in Texas for 4 years. These guys found it, brought it back to Georgia, aged it to 10 years. And we don't pick brands. Generally, we pick whiskey. So people send us whiskey, and we do blinds, and we taste everything blind. That the lineups get determined through blind tastings. I set it up for my guys, and I like to throw them a curveball every now and again. I'll put their favorite whiskey in there and see if they shit on it. You know what I mean? Just like ruin everything that they thought they loved. And they're like, "Are you fucking with us, Bobby? Did you put William LaRue Weller like in a blind for us to like?" It was so rich and so dark and so just on this other plane of existence. It's maybe one of the best whiskeys I've ever had. Wow. And yes, we sold every bottle that. I know there's a couple barrels of it less that they're taking to 12-year, but that specific juice that was in that Doc Holliday bottle. And my issue was that they never differentiated the 6 and the 7, the 10 years. Just a Doc Holliday bottle with a different age statement. But I said, look, this guy's legacy's in this bottle. So if we're going to do a white label situation, we got to make a neck tag that tells this guy's story. And yeah, like that. So this is the type of things that we do in the lineup, and we're now gamifying it. So starting in March, we're right at the end of figuring this out. So our March release ships in about 2 weeks, and you're going to guess the age, the proof, and the type of whiskey. And you're going to get a score that tells you how accurate your palate is.
Oh,
That's
nice.
pretty neat.
That'll be
So
fun.
that'll be fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
Are you
Yeah,
putting
what
it
is
on
this
like an app or on the website so people can like compare themselves to others?
You know, we've thought about creating a leaderboard, but the reality is someone could easily cheat and just use a
that's
different
true.
phone. So it's like for instance, Wordle doesn't have a leaderboard, right?
True.
Because it's all like I could just use my computer, find out the Wordle. I'm like, I get it in 2 guesses every time. It's
Right.
crazy. 7 one-word thing.
Right.
But so we thought about that. We are going to have a log so people can do it. We're going to have a shareable function to it.
Nice.
But yeah, like you technically could cheat, so we didn't want to create anything like that. But yeah, we're going to get people to rate the spirit too, so that way we can get these distilleries
yeah.
some data on what territories are really liking their products. So when they're thinking about expanding to other states, we can help them out a little bit.
I like that.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a great idea.
So, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that gamification to me is kind of that next level in marketing where you're creating engagement with the community, but you're challenging the consumer a little bit. Like we all have that buddy that thinks they know everything about everything. Well, let's put you to the test, and you know what? Let's put a bottle on the line. Loser's got to buy the other person a bottle from the lineup. You know.
I like it. Yeah, we have a few friends who we could definitely do that with, so that'll be high on the list.
Gosh, yes. Bring it to the whole consortium and be like, all right, let's see
Yeah,
what you
that's
got.
true.
So for those who've heard the name but haven't done enough research about you, how does Blind Barrels work?
So Blind Barrels is really a subscription. So if you go to Blind Barrels and you can get a one-off kit, right? But then we have a quarterly and an annual option. And essentially, we are seasonal curation. So everybody gets the same kit at the same time.
Okay.
So like right now, we're really close to the March release. So somebody that joins today, we generally say, hey, we're close to the next release. Do you want a kit now? And then we dial the renewal back to before March, or you just want to wait another 2 weeks before we get this release out? But if somebody orders in, let's say, April 1st, right, we send them the March kit immediately.
Got you.
And then they'll get so the next kits come out mid-June, mid-September, mid-December. The only one that we kind of usually get out a little bit early is June because of Father's Day.
Okay.
And someone's like, well, what about Mother's Day? And I'm like, look, we backed up from Christmas. We started at Christmas, December, and then went September, June. And
Yeah.
we have a ton of female members in our group, so
Sure, yeah.
we're not trying to overlook. They have the better palates, by the way, like when we do
I
a
can
couple lives with everybody. But then we're in about 44 states. We're just shy of like 4,000 members now. At some point, we will probably cap out the whiskey subscription. We are going to add tequila at some point.
Oh, that's neat.
There might be a way to do beer and wine, and we're in the middle of a capital raise right now to expand to hotels and restaurants.
Oh, wow.
That'll be fun. So do you have an idea of, like, I'm sure you do, but broad spectrum, what would that look like at like a hotel? Just come in and sit down like, hey, I want a blind flight.
Well, at a hotel, it would be in the room, right? So you go to Vegas and you got these mini bottles. They're charging $60 for Johnny Walker Black 50 ml, right?
Yeah.
And people buy that shit because they don't want to go down. Hey, they just lost a bunch of money, or they just won a bunch of money. They want to commiserate, and I'm going to take this $30 Voss water, and I'm going to
Right.
Gosh, yeah.
it's $20 bag of chips. But yeah, hotels will probably, creating the experience in the room. The thing that we want to be able to make sure is that the hotel is going to carry the product in all their bars, and that's going to be the upside for these. At the end of the day, we're trying to create symbiotic relationships with these small American craft distillers. We're showcasing them. We don't do what other subscriptions do. We're the only double blind out there, right? But there's other whiskey subscriptions out there, and we know how a lot of them operate because we talk to all the brands, and a lot of times they charge marketing fees, or they want the whiskey for free, or at below cost. And because we're working with small American businesses, what we're trying to do is make sure that they're winning, that we're not, putting a burden on them to be in the lineup. In the industry, it's all, what's getting the liquor on the lips. That's the hardest thing.
Oh, for sure.
You've had that buddy that says, you got to get this bottle, and you get the bottle and you're like, I don't think it was that fucking good. your palate doesn't align with what their particular flavor preferences are. But then you're making a choice based upon popularity or how cool the bottle looks or price, right? So all these components come into play, but what's not in play is whether you like the spirit or not.
Right.
And if you do something blind, as you know, not only are you more likely to become a bigger fan of that brand by discovering it on your own, you're more likely to be loyal to that brand too. So we want people to go visit these distilleries, go try their food pairings, join their email list for when their special releases come out. We've had a bunch of times where members that are in their own whiskey clubs choose a barrel from distilleries that have been in our lineup.
Oh,
Cool.
And we've been offered commissions on that, but we don't accept that. So we really take heart to the history of the whiskey community. It's an interesting industry that you don't see in a lot of industries. Like the wine industry is very competitive. It's very cutthroat.
Very.
When Heaven Hills, Rick House burns down, people don't, laugh and cheer that on. They say, hey, can we give you some product to help you get back on your feet? So the history of that community is really important to us, and we really, are tethered in a strong way to that ethos and how we operate. So when we're working with the distillery and getting them in the lineup, sometimes we love a brand and we want to get them in the lineup, and the timing doesn't work out for the amount of product they have and what they want to do. And so we just say, hey, you tell us when, and we'll build up a lineup around that. We try to keep it low pressure. We try to keep it, every now and again, you'll get a distillery that doesn't. We had a brand that was just in our lineup, Taconic. Have you guys heard of Taconic from upstate New York?
Oh.
Their stuff is awesome. They were on our list from day one, and they were supposed to be in our very first lineup. And there was a person that we were dealing with just didn't understand the math of how the samples work versus the bottles, and they fell out, and it didn't happen, right? And then years later, earlier this year, one of my guys made a video about like a whiskey wish list and put Taconic on it, and the owner reached out. He's like, well, how do we get in the lineup? I'm like, well, we tried like 3 years ago. Can we? I'm like, here's the process. Here's the math. Here's what the thing is. He goes, oh, well, that's all very reasonable. I'm like, I know. And I'll tell you, we have this barrel proof rye from Taconic. All their products are really good, by the way. They have a maple bourbon. I mean, they have we had just done a maple infusion in our September lineup from Vermont Distilling, Vermont number 14. The only time we've done a flavored whiskey, and it's 5% maple fusion, so it's really subtle.
Wow,
and
yeah.
if I was worried about putting a flavored whiskey in the lineup, but I got to tell you, man, we've never sold so much of one bottle in our lives. Like that bottle,
geez.
like in a blind with newbies and with experienced people, it kills in a lineup. So we didn't do the maple from Taconic for that reason, but that rye, that barrel proof rye, it's a bottle I will always have at my house. It's just that, I mean, it's so bold, but it's not weird. It's deep, it's rich. It tastes like I think it's only, 4 or 5 years old, maybe 6, but it tastes so much deeper and richer than that. And it doesn't have like all those, ryes can be so nuanced, right? It doesn't have to be spicy. It can be fruity. It can be floral. And when someone comes over and they go, I want a bourbon, and I go, oh, okay. And I'll pour them a Middle West pumpernickel rye, or I'll pour them the Taconic rye.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is an amazing bourbon. And I went, it's a rye.
Well,
Exactly. Pull the rug out.
so here's the question for you. So we're in North Carolina, and we're very strictly regulated by the ABC. So I know some of the answers to this, but then some of that I don't. Can we order blind barrels as a subscriber from you? And 2, if there is a bottle that we love, how can we buy it if we can't get it in an ABC store?
It's all fulfillment partners, right? So there's a lot of, for instance, Washington D.C. is a big loophole, right? DC doesn't follow any of the other rules. So when you look at a lot of, I'm not going to say how other companies operate, but a lot of companies do operate within that realm. But yeah, we can get product to North Carolina.
Awesome.
And so it's not easy, and there's a bunch of states that we're not in because it's not possible yet. Like Kentucky doesn't want anything coming in. They want to sell their own product within it. And the irony of that is Kentucky is really kind of paving the way for direct to consumer.
Yeah.
So the wine industry did this in the 70s. California really led the charge for direct to consumer. So all in 48 states or something like that, wineries can ship direct to consumer. So beer and spirits kind of fall under a different category.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's and look, like Texas is super weird. Like there's they have like a 4-tier system there. I mean, there's all sorts of.
Oh wow.
Every state, it kind of has its own thing. I mean, we'll see what happens, and they're really pushing really hard. People want direct to consumer for spirits and beer,
Right.
And so the demand is there, and it's just, can they remove some, because there's federal, there's state, there's county, there's all these different laws. So navigating all those things and having a good attorney and trying to figure out how to navigate it's always a difficult
Yeah,
process.
I definitely wanted to ask because we have a lot of people that listen, and when they hear, like when we bring other like whiskey vendors on, they're like, well, I'm not going to listen to this one because I can't get access to it or whatever, which I think is a crap.
Southern Star, man. Southern Star is such a, see, people on the West Coast don't. So have you guys heard of Frey Ranch?
I've heard of it. I've never had it before though.
So it's funny, like people on the West Coast know about Frey Ranch and people on the East Coast don't. And then on the East Coast, everybody knows about Southern Star, and the West Coast people didn't know about them. So we have a bunch. We're in Southern California. We have a bunch of California members, and we're going to do a barrel pick with Southern Star again, like we did. We're going to probably be coming through in late September, early October. We do a whiskey trip every year.
Yeah.
So we'll probably have to meet up with you guys when we're coming
that'd be
through.
awesome.
But we think Southern Star is just really special. That wheated bourbon, that cast strength, especially their barrel picks. And Pete, the owner, Pete Barger, he's just a good dude. I called him after the hurricane and just check in on our people and just, hey, is there anything we can do? Are you guys safe? And luckily Statesville ended up being okay. But he sent us like 5 samples that were different barrels, and he was like, don't be swayed by the color, don't let the color because there was one that was like, they were all really good, but there was one that was so dark. I don't know if I've ever seen whiskey this dark, and you never know why in the rick house or the rack house,
Right.
why one barrel becomes this, like the airflow or whatever it is. But when they won the New York Spirits competition earlier that year, the sister barrel, the barrel right next to it, was that sample that he sent us.
Oh, okay.
And he wanted to put his best foot forward, but we said we would blind everything, and we did. But man, that particular barrel was just on this other level. It was the same ABV, the same color as the sister barrel that won the New York Spirits competition. And yeah, I mean, when we sold that at the distillery, a cast strength bottle is, I think, $70, right?
Yeah.
And this was a barrel pick, so we could have, and it's a special barrel pick, so we could have probably sold that for $90 or $100, and we would have done that, but we sold it for $70. The goal is to sell it for the same price and oftentimes less than if you were at the distillery. So we don't do this big upsell on the bottles themselves. We don't say, hey, this is a bottle that you could never get, so we're going to charge another 15-20% more.
Right.
And we talk to venture capitalists, and they hate that we don't do that.
Sure.
Of course.
And I'm like, but we keep our members happy. And at the end of the day, I want them to order bottles. We don't make very big margins because we have fulfillment partners, and then they get a piece. And so and we have shipping discounts and all this other stuff and so we don't lose money when we sell a bottle, but we really don't make money when we sell a bottle. And we do indirectly because our members are happy, and then they stay members.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So when we subscribe, we get a box. What's the best practices when we open this box to get the best experience out of it?
I mean, so I would get 4 glasses. So, if you have 4 Glens, obviously you can do one and you can rinse it out. Everyone does it a little bit differently. We don't like to tell people like this is the way that you have to do it, but we do host a blind live for our members twice every quarter. So we suggest, hey, come on and do the live with us, because you'll meet people in the whiskey community. Newbies kind of feel like the new kid at school, and then there's the people that have been at every single one of them. And yeah, we get a little loose, we get a lot of fun. My 2 guys lead the tasting and really start the educational component about the 4 phases of tasting: the color, the appearance, the aroma, the taste, and the finish, what each of those phases are. We go through, I mean, we always just say take notes. There's a lot of things that we could do in the kit that we didn't do, where it's like, oh, do we put a journal in there? Or do we put like, some limestone rich water and you could dilute it? And, could we put coffee grounds in there to cleanse your palate and your aroma in between samples? There's a lot of things that we could have done to enhance it, but it just felt like too many bells and whistles. And also we have a lot of people that are new to whiskey, and we don't want it to be overwhelming for them. So the only thing that we do suggest sometimes, so the upcoming lineup that we have in March is called Heat. It's a partnership with Randy Sullivan from Bourbon Real Talk.
Oh, yeah.
And Randy's a good dude. And this March lineup is just all bangers. And they are all really high proof. You know, we've got a hazmat that's in the lineup. The last time we did this it was all barrel picks 2 years ago in March 2023, and it was like 104 proof, and then the Southern Star one, which was 116, and the Frey one, which was 116, and then we had a 26-year rye that was 151 proof. So it was actually 159, and I had to proof it down because there's some states you can't ship to if it's above 153.
Oh, wow.
So there was like a interesting kind of curveball with that. So that was the first time we did a hazmat. The second, so that box was called Some Like It Hot. We always do kind of usually a pop culture reference to a song or a movie. In this case, Heat, you know, where you got Pacino and De Niro, you got two. And so in this case, it's Randy and me and my guys is the Pacino, De Niro, and then obviously the heat level that's coming from it. So we do suggest especially with newbies, we have to sit there because they're going to take a sip and be like, that tastes like a lot of whiskey. And it's going to be, and yes, I always say try it hot. And then, the whole point of cask strength and barrel proof, whatever you want to call it, whatever marketing term you want to use, is not, well, let's put some hair on our chest and be tough, and let's proof it down to your liking. That's what the whole point of it is. The only thing you want to mix it, you want to put ice cube in it, you want to do whatever you want, like do a big cube and then it evolves in the glass. That's really cool. I have a brother-in-law that throws crushed ice on, and I'm like, dude, don't do the crushed ice thing.
That's different.
Yeah, bring your Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey thing and go do that with your crushed ice over there. But so that's the only thing that I kind of would suggest. I'm like, the crushed ice thing, I don't recommend that, because at the end of the day, we're not taking shots, right? We're not rushing through this. We are imbibing in a responsible way, but also in a way that connects with the people around you, right? This is a healthy way to approach alcohol.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ways of doing it too. I always try it without any type of water or ice in it first, just to see what is this like straight out of the cask, and then I'll usually put a large ice ball in it just to have the evolution of what the taste is like as the ice is slowly melting into the whiskey.
Yeah, it's interesting there. I wish somebody would do the math and the research on you could get into the physics and just the melting ratio to the proof, and I'm sure you could do a lot of math to figure out how long is too long to be chilling with your whiskey. But I usually will proof it down a little. Like whiskey stones are just annoying to me.
Same,
I saw this. It was like a Kickstarter or something where they have an electric thing that keeps the glass cold or something, and I'm like, I like that idea.
Yeah,
I can see
if it works, yeah, exactly. Like that, there's some element that somehow has a component that keeps. I'm sure it's really easy to keep it hot, but is there something that keeps it cold? That I would dig something like that if some invention that actually works.
Yeah,
that keeps the glass chilled somehow. That'd be dope. That way I can kind of get the best of all worlds.
Yeah,
but everyone to each their own. We don't. What we also like about Randy with Bourbon Real Talk is that he's not like, I'm the professor and you're the student. It's like, no, we'll do what you like. What are you want to put some Coke Zero on that after you're at the end of it? I'm like, hey, someone's got to experiment with it. I have a buddy that always saves a little of each one, and then he likes to be an amateur blender. We all have that one buddy, and he likes to do a blend with the samples that are in whatever kit it is, and say whether it was a good blend or not.
Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought about doing that.
Yeah. We have a lot of bottles to blend.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the single malt will mess anything up, so you have to be careful with that, right?
Yeah.
But we have a tasting table. We converted the wheel into a table, and the wheel. Do I have one around here? No, I don't. But it's meant to open up your senses on what you're getting and the aroma and the flavors and the finish and all that. And then the QR code then tells you everything about the spirit. So the age, the proof, the type of whiskey, the aroma, the taste, the finish, the backstory of the distillery. And then, if you want to buy a full bottle, you can.
Nice.
That's neat. So how often are people buying the full bottles after they try? Or does it really depend on how the tasting goes for each person?
It really depends. We have some members that buy 3 of every bottle every time. They buy one to drink, one to share, and one to save. For the special releases, so that barrels pick that we did, the smallest batch that we did with Still Austin, we had to limit that to 1 per person.
Makes sense.
Yeah, we sold out I was hoping it was going to last the 6 weeks in, but it lasted about 3 weeks, and everybody wanted a bottle of that. You can always tell when a lineup is really well balanced because you have an equal amount of all the bottles being ordered. You have somebody that will get a single malt and a bourbon, and especially when, not all single malt people are bourbon drinkers and vice versa, right? So when you see somebody, a large group of people that are ordering the bourbon and the single malt, that's how you know you did something right. Because we are going for diversity generally in the lineup. We want there to be a different experience. We want it to be a roller coaster. And so sometimes, I'd say the only time we kind of screwed it up, that Vermont number 14 that has that 5% maple infusion.
Yeah.
That was sample A in September. And because we didn't really know because it was the 90 proofer, we didn't really kind of know where to put her, 92,
right.
something like that. And then we had Kings County, their straight bourbon after that. Now, I love Kings County. And Kings County is awesome. Have you guys ever had Kings County or heard of Kings County out of Brooklyn?
I don't think so. I haven't really heard of
it.
many out of New York in general, to be honest.
I mean, the girls have talked about it.
Penelope out of Jersey, right? You got Black Button out of, I think, Rochester. They've been in New York. But yeah, so Kings County is kind of one of the OG kind of craft distilleries. And I love their stuff, but I got to tell you, after that maple infusion, I don't think it shined as well as it would. So we kind of told everybody, I'm like, look, do sample B at a later date on its own too. Don't just run it through, because sometimes it's that juxtaposition of one versus the other. And we're trying to make sure that it's not really a competition, but we're trying to make sure that each of, the expressions are shining on their own. And so sometimes we are just ramping up in proof, and sometimes like single malts you kind of can't put them in the middle. You have to either put them in the front or the back, right? Because it messes up the flow.
Yeah.
So, there is a rhyme and a reason, and we sometimes have debates about the order, and it's usually like B and C. We know what A and D are, and it's trying to figure out what those two middle ones are.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I love that you guys put so much into this. Like, it's not just hey, we found some bottles. We think this will taste okay. You guys go, you actually the reason why it's quarterly is because you put a lot of thought and process into what makes the most sense. How can we curate this experience for everybody, new and old in the business?
It's a lot of work to create a lineup. Just the reveal page and the copy, and working with the distilleries, and there's all these freights with all the liquid, and it's when we were starting the company, we were going to do whiskey every other month, and we were going to do tequila in the off months, and then somebody brilliant was like, you should just focus on whiskey because you're going to split the audience and you'll fail at both. And I'm like, you're probably right. And tequila and importing it is a whole other animal that we're still cracking, and that we have it figured out. It's just we're trying to find the right timing for that. But then whiskey, the whole process of what it takes, just with labels and creating custom labels and getting certificate of label acceptance and, all these legal things that actually have to happen, there's a lot of steps, and it's a lengthy process. So it's not just the curation, it's all the things that we have to do to make sure that the lineup happens and that it syncs up. So it's almost like we're doing 4 releases every quarter, because each one is its own deal, and every distillery operates differently. And so getting that timing to sync up, every now and again we'll have one that falls out right as we get close to a release, and we always have kind of one in the wings just ready to go in case something like that happens. And so we're always we've always been on time with all of our shipments. We're our bottling partner is bottling all this week. The packaging will be all the week after that. And then we get it to fulfillment partners and we get everything out. So the idea is that if you have a friend or a sister or mother or father, or, a coworker or somebody that's in another state, everyone gets that same lineup at that same time. So, we always say great whiskey is meant to be shared. And that's really, once again, the whiskey community, the heart of the whiskey community is, well, let's not sit around and have this goal of getting really drunk. No, let's sit around and make connections with other people, whether it's our members, whether it's our members making it. When we do our lives, we'll have several people on the live where there's, 4, 5, 6 people on just that one Zoom. So we might have 100 people in the Zoom, but there's really 200, because there's a lot of couples that do it together.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of, and it's great because a lot of times the people think that all whiskey drinkers are men, and that's not true. 30% of bourbon drinkers are women.
Oh wow.
But a lot of times women will buy our product for their husband, and then they end up doing it with them.
Yeah.
And it can make your relationship stronger, to think, oh, I think my wife would like whiskey. And then it turns out, yeah, we're not a whiskey brand, we're a whiskey experience, right?
Yeah, that's good.
And that whole concept. And yeah, sometimes we will have a brand that I think the most accessible of a brand that we ever had was 3-Chord.
Yeah.
I know that one.
Which is Neil Giralto's. It's Pat Benatar's husband. He's a guitar player for Pat Benatar.
That's right. Yeah.
So 3-Chord is in a lot of states. It's fairly accessible.
Yeah.
But we did their Strange collaboration, which his daughter was dating Johnny Strange, who was this daredevil, and their family had a winery, and they used their Cabernet barrels to finish the whiskey. So there was a cool story there.
Yeah.
Johnny Strange actually passed away during one of his crazy things he was doing. So this is a way to kind of the families to kind of pay respect for each other through this thing that kind of lived, in the wake of his death. So there's a story behind every single whiskey that's in the lineup, and for me, that's the hard thing is sometimes there's a great story and there's not great whiskey.
Yeah.
We get, tons of bottles sent to us, and I make blinds for my guys. And, that's the irony of my role is that I never get to do blinds anymore.
Right. Good point.
So I do have a couple members that now send me blinds, which is really cool.
Oh, that's neat.
Or I'll come onto their YouTube thing and, they got 10 subscribers and I'll just come and do the live with them. And just cause I'm like, I never get to do blinds anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's the way that I get to still kind of have a little bit of fun too.
Sweet.
I like that.
So since you are kind of come up on our time now already, there is a question we like to ask all of our guests, and that is, if you were to tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
Wow. Okay. So like I'm Marty McFly. I'm going back in time.
Yes.
My mom's maybe trying to date me.
Yeah.
To remember to enjoy the hard days. This was advice somebody gave me before I was making a documentary that was really difficult to make. And it's something that I still think about when there's really difficult days, that when you're faced with something that feels insurmountable and you eventually get through it and you look back on those times with pride. So it's so easy to get swept up and to be overwhelmed in these times that are difficult or these days that are difficult, that part of you has to remember to enjoy it while you're in the moment of difficulty, because it is going to be either a lesson you learn from failure or it's going to be a point of pride where you're going to grow from going through something difficult. So I don't know if I would listen, but when my buddy told me that, I was at the right age to be receptive of it.
Right.
So
Good.
That's awesome. I love that. I don't think we've had that one before. That's really good.
Yeah. So I have two final questions. One, super simple, kind of. What does success look like for you, whether it be with Blind Barrels or just personally?
The success always starts with the home. So if my wife and my kids are happy, then I'm happy. So they're my big rocks. If you ever heard of the expression what the big rocks are, this guy has this container and he puts in big rocks and then he puts in these pebbles and then he puts in the sand. And is it full? And then he pours in the water and it's still not full. And the reality is what makes that possible is that you got to put in your big rocks first. So my family is my big rock. I put them first, and those are always on the forefront of my mind. But I always feel success is a choice because it's about perception, right? And I think, when you get into the concept of where you're not where you want to be yet, and you don't have gratitude for where you've come from, that I try to take a moment each week and carve out a moment to have gratitude and be thankful, because I think if I would look from 3-4 years ago when this started to where we are now, I would be super grateful that we're where we are. And now I'm thinking about where we want to take the company, and we're not there yet.
Yeah. Right.
And there's that expression, comparison's the thief of joy. We all get caught up into it, and no one else cares about your success or your failure that much except for the people that really love you and the people that are really rooting for you. So for me, success is really about perception and gratitude. So right now, because we're thriving and we're growing and we're doing all these things and we're expanding, rather than thinking I'm not where we want to be yet, I'm super grateful for where we are. And that mindset will allow us to get to the other goals.
Nice.
You're right. I love it.
So last one, for those who don't already subscribe to Blind Barrels or just want to keep up with you guys, where can they find you?
So you can follow us on Instagram at Blind Barrels. That's also our TikTok. That's also our YouTube, right? So we locked them all up. In fact, if you looked at Blind Barrels before we were a company, it was just a lot of blind people surfing. And then surfing barrels. There was like 20 videos of blind people surfing barrels. And so, you can go to Blind Barrels, and look, if you use the code whiskey10, you can get 10% off of anything, whether it's merchandise, whether it's a one-off box. If you just want to try a box before you jump in as a subscriber, but if you want to get 10% off an annual or quarterly, and any new member for quarterly or annual, we always send you a custom tasting glass with your first kit. And our tasting glasses are really thick, so they're kind of like got a restaurant quality element to it. So a lot of tasting glasses are very, you knock them over and you shatter them. These ones are a little thicker than normal. We threw a lot of glass in there to just make sure there was some heft to it. Nice. But yeah, you can check out Blind Barrels, and if you hit up our support email, you're going to get me. All our members have my cell phone so that they can shoot me suggestions on distilleries in their area. I think September we're going to try to make a members only kit where it's going to be all suggestions from members that end up in the line.
Nice. That'll be cool.
So we're trying to create different themes like that, and yeah, we're working on another partnership with Fred Minnick, for later this year. So that's going to be another fun one for sure.
Awesome,
sweet. This episode hasn't come out yet, but we just interviewed one of the wholesalers of Liberty and Plenty, which is out of Durham, North Carolina. So there's another one for you if you need it.
Well, send them our way, because that's the thing is if it holds up in a blind, and especially craft's great because they're doing all the things. They set the trends. They're taking all the chances. You got guys like Alan Bishop that was out of French Lick that now started Old Homestead, and he's putting kasha, and he's doing all sorts of weird grains, and he's doing a 4 grain that has oats in it, or he'll say buckwheat because buckwheat's there's 2% in all the rye has buckwheat in it, so he puts it as part of the mash bill. So the craft movement is shaping the future, and they have been for a while. So the people that are doing the weird and interesting and awesome things are all coming from craft. So any suggestion that comes through, we're obviously very open-minded, and I'll put it in a blind and we'll put it to the test.
Cool. Sweet. Love it.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. Because
I appreciate you guys.
I know
Thank
you're
you for having me
slammed.
on.
Thank you. But yeah, and for those who are watching, check out what happens afterwards when me and Tyler record us trying our blind and seeing how horribly wrong we are when it comes to guessing these things.
I can't wait to listen to that one. Yeah, right. You guys should, because the kit that you have isn't gamified yet. So I would guess age-proof, type of whiskey, and bottle price.
Okay. Perfect. We'll definitely do that. We'll make it fun.
Create a scoring system. Maybe put some stakes on the line.
Oh, I can.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. We might even put stakes on the line.
Yeah, actual stakes on the line. Exactly. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Bobby.
Cheers.
Cheers.